I think there is a massive difference between what people say they like to do and what they actually do. But there are reasons for that. In our own yard, if you like, I don't think we have the range. I don't think we have the availability of this product, sort of readily available. I don't think we have the transparency. I don't think people understand enough about it in order to make these decisions. So I think it's a matter of time before people are more ready to incorporate and to change their purchasing decision and to actually do what they say they want to do.
That's the voice of Petko Tashev, speaking about the future of homeware. He's the co-founder of the Home of Sustainable Things. And today, we're talking about the future of homeware with a real focus on circular design. We'll be finding out how the way we furnish our homes impacts so much more than the aesthetic of our homes and what this will mean in the future. Petko is the co-founder of the Home of Sustainable Things, or HOST, a London-based homeware shop dedicated to circular design. He carefully selects designers who transform waste materials like coffee grounds, plastic bottles, and metal scraps into beautiful and functional objects. His ethos is all about rethinking consumption, proving that sustainability and aesthetics can go hand in hand. And he's creating a space through HOST where innovation, ethics, and creativity meet. I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN, the world's leading trend forecasting company. And you're listening to Lives of Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast about how we'll live our lives in the future. So Petko, I'm delighted to have you on the podcast. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you so much, Carla. I'm delighted to be with you today as well. My name is Petko Tashev, and I am co-founding director of the Home of Sustainable Things. So the Home of Sustainable Things is a platform that collaborates with the international network of designers, makers, material researchers to identify waste streams in the economy and develop design processes that tackle these issues. As you said, we use ceramic waste, construction waste, textile waste, different type of bio waste as raw materials to create with. And in the process, we reduce or minimize basically material loss and materials lent to landfill. So it's an entirely new way of making design.
Is this something that you've always been interested in? I'm always intrigued as to how people find their way into sustainability, and that's a very broad umbrella term. So I appreciate we're going to be much more specific than that in today. But is this, did you have a big awakening, or is this something that you've always been interested in and have made it into your kind of life's work?
My background is events, and I think basically sort of like for years, you've seen the amount of materials, the amount of waste that you get, sort of for produced after a very short space of time. Whether it's a day, whether it's a week or month, it's still a relatively short space of time. And seeing the material, seeing all this, just like foods, everything just being sort of like put in skips, it was heartbreaking. So I don't think you can live with observing this and living with it for a very long time without trying to do something about it. So that is what happened essentially. We started to look for ways and accessories, how we can basically minimize that, just, minimize it, start making a difference, minimizing this, sort of different type of ways, replacing materials with other that can be, that are a lot easier on the earth. And as we started to research, we basically realized that it doesn't exist. That was in itself was mind blowing because, at the time it was and I suppose it still is a huge discourse out there about sustainability. So we could not comprehend the fact that everyone was talking about sustainability, and yet there was nothing in tangible terms that we can incorporate to, to improve our processes. They weren't, able to help us with any leads. So we started to do this massive research, and as we researched, we found a very few designers basically that were working in that way, sort of like the so-called circular design, which at the time we didn't really know that that's what it's called basically. So it was a transition for us. That said, I grew up in a small place. So for me, fishing and sort of like going out and like swimming in the river was a rather a norm. So Whether that connection from my childhood was hidden for quite some time and then rediscovered, it could be that.
Yeah. Can you explain for people listening who might not know, what is circular design?
The way we see circular design is either we use materials which are destined to, for landfill, and redesign these materials by giving them an entirely new lifespan, which will keep them in the economy, for much longer. And by doing so, we reduce the need for new materials. We have to understand that everything comes to an end one day, sooner or later. So we have to think of that moment, whether it's in like 1 year, whether it's 10 years or 100 years, everything will come to an end. So what happens then? That is the question.
So I want to get into a kind of stickier topic, which we call, we're not the only ones, but the say-do gap, which is consumers saying one thing and doing another. And I think when it comes to sustainable practices, there's a lot of this at the moment. So perceived wisdom would be Gen Z, very environmentally aware generation, and say that they are concerned about sustainability, concerned about climate change. But when it actually comes down to the decisions they're making in terms of spending their money, we're not necessarily seeing that borne through. And I wondered your opinions on that. What are you seeing with the makers that you work with, the retail environment that you've created? Is there a big say-do gap, or are you more optimistic? Are you actually seeing, well, not even just the younger generation, but people putting their money where their mouth is?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a massive difference between what people say they like to do and what they actually do. But there are reasons for that. In our own yard, if you like, I don't think we have the range. I don't think we have the availability of this product, sort of readily available. I don't think we have the transparency. I don't think people understand enough about it in order to make these decisions. So I think it's a matter of time before people are more ready to incorporate and to change their purchasing decision and to actually do, what they say they want to do. There is another reason for it, basically, which is you have to understand, I think, the full conditions of the market. We live in an economy and we're surrounded by products that have existed for decades or have been developed for decades. You've got mass-produced products, and then we've come to to understand, and to have a perception of design based on those, circumstances that we live within. So we now have an entirely new way of making, which we don't have an infrastructure for. We have to develop our understanding of using these materials. We have to, develop machinery. So all that takes time. But for people, completely unaware of the processes that, happen in the background, they would always compare what's available with what you have to put on the market, which sometimes can be difficult. So not only that we have to be sustainable, but we have to be, I think, aesthetically just as good at the very least. And then we have to be price competitive. So that's not easy, but I think it's perfectly possible. It will just take some time to arrive at that point.
I think why we find what you do so fascinating is the sort of waste aspect, because if you're creating sustainable products from scratch, that can be even more challenging. Whereas you're taking things that otherwise would go to landfill. You're finding a new way, and the makers that you work with are finding new ways to create products with those. Are there any sort of specific examples that you can give that I guess bring that to life and will make people think differently about this?
I think, there are several strong contenders. We've got a range developed from electronic glass, which uses glass from domestic appliances such as washing machines, microwaves, fridges. This is the first time we're seeing this type of glass, in use. So it's taken 4 years to develop incredible product. We have biomaterial developed from agricultural waste, incredible quality. So that has got immense potential in front. But if there was one example to give today, perhaps because I'm so involved into this project, it's a project that it's called Rescinder. And it is a project that sees the upcycling of ceramic waste. So we use ceramic waste which is basically, sort of like seconds defective, unwanted items from ceramic producers, from businesses, and turn it into new materials that we then use as a base for entirely new production. So not only that, this process tackle a waste stream that is currently unaddressed and produces like millions of tons of waste. So the UK alone produces between 32 to 54 million tons of ceramic waste per annum. So not only that will be, sort of like providing the first dent, if you like, into that sort of like waste pile, but also because this project gives us the possibility to reach out to a huge number of people. We're looking to create a product. I mean, that's always been the intention. It just doesn't happen overnight. But that project will give us the possibility to create a product that people interact with on a daily basis. So by doing so, we can actually have a very affordable product in like number of houses.
The time of recording this, sort of net zero commitments seem to be being dismantled in countries all around the world in a drive for, improved productivity and to help in cost of living crisis, and without this turning into a political broadcast in any shape or form. Do you feel that this is going to, and I'll take the optimistic, the positive might be that this is going to require creators to step in. So if governments aren't going to dictate that we are more sustainable in our practices, then creators and creatives are often the alternative in that. You work with people like this. Do you feel that there is potentially an upside, a silver lining to this because the creatives will be called on? Or do you think, therefore, that some of those arguments about the need for circular design, the need for more sustainable business practices are going to get lost during this period?
Without making it too political, I think, sort of the very councils, the very sort of organization that are in place and publicly funded to basically support these makers, to support these intentions, aren't doing a great job. And unfortunately, sort of like, it's almost like it feels that sort of they're developing their own agenda without having the tools and understanding to do so. So it's almost like fitting on a trend without thinking of actually sort of making it into something sustainable and something that actually sort of like and impactful. I don't think by simply holding lectures and talking about the market research and, sort of the market facts, we can make the difference. I think the research and I think, sort of that desire for change has to be supplemented by real work. To me, that is the only way where, sort of we can engage with the wider public, which is also why we are doing what we do. We've always been interested in, rather than developing sort of ideas and material, we have always been intended to put a product on the market, something that people can take on and use. And that in itself, as I said, sort of like has the power to transform the thinking of a person towards, sort of the issue.
It's political, it's consumer-led. There are so many different sort of facets to it. Let's pause there for a moment. I'm going to ask you a few quick-fire questions about you rather than the topic in hand, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So what's your morning routine hack? Is it stretching, yoga, particular coffee? What's the thing that gets you going first thing in the morning?
It is coffee, and I just quite like it, the way sort of I make it with just, sort of like with a certain amount of foam. It just makes it perfectly strong enough, like not too strong. So it's just perfect. Okay.
In what environment do you feel most creative?
When I put the seed of a thought and then leave a little space. Sometimes it's just this walk in the park, and I come to an idea that's sort of like, or rather to solutions which I've sought for some time. So it's sometimes just sort of planting that thought, but then allowing it, sort of the space. I think that is what works for me best.
Okay, what's your guilty pleasure?
Well, I'm an Arsenal fan, so I allow myself to watch a football game even when I'm incredibly stressed.
That's an excellent answer. Okay, what's had the biggest impact on your sense of style?
To be honest with you, I think sort of like I moved away, sort of like I came to London when I was like 19 or 20 years old. So I literally just had to sort of evolve my own sort of style of, sense of styling. But I think that has changed enormously since we started work and I started to be connected to the natural environment a lot more. I can't see myself like wearing fibers that are unnatural at the moment. Sort of, I can't see myself wearing sort of like something that is incredibly sort of fashionable, if you like, if that it contradicts with my beliefs about how things should be made.
Petko, I didn't ask you this question, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bulgaria.
Okay. And why did you end up coming to the UK?
I genuinely can't give you a straight answer to that, simply because there isn't one. So I visited UK and I was just basically here just to sort of as a summer work holiday, basically, which, sort of I spent in Norfolk. But it's like, that's the most interesting bit is the fact that I was telling my friends that we have to live in London without having a particular reason why. I just knew it was a certainty within me that I have to live in London. And even when I initially arrived, I was just basically, I would walk the streets for hours and hours just to learn the city. And finally, when I was living in London, sort of that was basically sort of all confirmed by the way I felt about the city.
Yeah. Which ones you do. Okay, we are going to go back into questions and look maybe a little bit more about the future. So let's put circular design to one side just for a moment, although I have a feeling it might form part of your answer. But how do you see homeware specifically evolving as we look to the future? What are you seeing at the moment that do you think is going to really impact the aesthetics of what we put in our homes?
I think before looking towards the future, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that we now have an alternative choice through circular design. This is a choice of products in the way we interact with goods that I don't think we had before. I think it's the first time that we actually have a real choice to make as a consumer. It's an important milestone, but I see it more of a stepping stone for us to develop however we like to develop. And I think that I think that will have an enormous influence on how we see homeware and how we basically furnish our homes in the future. With circular design promoting regenerative materials and products, I think that will develop our conscious towards how materials are made and what materials we like to see, what materials we'd like to be surrounded by. I think our appreciation and our understanding of how these products are made and the craftsmanship behind them would increase. And I think perhaps with that, our definition of luxury will change as well.
That's a very interesting topic. And having spoken to people about how the luxury market will evolve in the future, I do think there's something in that to a certain extent, we're all aware of what the luxury option is. And for many people that cost means that's out of their ability to get hold of things. But for those 0.1% or whatever it is, when money is there's so much of it, luxury then takes on a whole different angle. And I do think in a world increasingly driven by AI and technology, homemade will become a real luxury. And to your point here about the makers and the creators and, short runs of things, because there is only as much as one person or a number of people can make rather than it coming off a factory product line. There is a whole new definition of luxury within that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just doesn't make sense to have the ability to purchase, sort of well-made goods and not doing it. It makes little sense to me to have the ability to buy and yet to surround yourself with materials and products that would leach, sort of toxic materials. It's just like essentially you're buying goods that will poison you. That makes no sense. So I think in that sense, I think we'll just rediscover or rather redefine what luxury is. And I think sort of like in terms of natural materials, there are already quite a lot of stats already there that basically provide the evidence of, sort of the importance of natural materials and surrounding ourselves with natural materials on well-being, on productivity, on health in general. So I do think that, sort of in time as well, we would appreciate natural materials more and more. And I think at the moment, sort of what we see in terms of that drive for uniformity in design, I think that will change as well. And with sort of growing understanding and awareness of production and natural materials and natural inconsistencies, I think we'll begin to enjoy and to embrace sort of this fabric of materials and this imperfections, if you like. And I think the conversation would revolve very much on exposing this, sort of the materiality of what's been used, and also the real impact of the goods that we use.
So what do you think we can do right now to inspire the next generation to prioritise circular design, to prioritise more sustainable ways of living? What needs to be done now?
Perhaps I need to speak about what we are doing, because essentially we're working with, sort of the majority of the designers whom we work with is young designers, young material researchers. I think we have to find and provide the format, the interactive format that would engage their interest, that would communicate the issues that we face, but also provide the evidence, the tangible evidence of the solutions that we have and that are implemented currently to tackle these issues. I think just bombarding someone with with facts and sort of about the sort of and negative facts is like, it can be overwhelming. But if we're able to connect these dots and provide the full sentence in terms of the issues that we face, but also the solutions for these ways that we found through creativity, I think that provides young people with the conditions to make an informed decisions. And I think, sort of making that informed decision is essential, but also we have to provide sort of them with a pathway to develop their thought ideas into actual processes. This is actually something that is happening now. So I genuinely think that we have to find a way to provide young designers with pathway to develop their ideas into market solutions. That's not easy. And, sort of the way the businesses are set at the moment, they're looking for fast, return on investment, for immediate gratification, if you like. But with circular design, that doesn't work quite that way.
Yeah, no, it's not instantaneous. Final question. Are you more anxious or hopeful about the future?
I don't think we can be more anxious and do what we do. I think looking back at 2018, we started with 4 designers and none was UK based. Fast forwarding to 2025, we now work with over 40 designers, several of whom work within the UK, several of whom have got important projects that can make a real impact. Seeing how much has been done in the space of these 6-7 years, we can only think, and it's natural, I suppose, to think, what can be done in 10, 15 or 20 years? So in that regard, I'm very much hopeful. That said, there are a lot of challenges and consistent issues that we face that we have to overcome.
We shall see. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. Everyone listening, please go and check out Home of Sustainable Things, and we can all do our bit. I think that's one of the kind of strong messages from today's conversation. But thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. So thank you so much for that. A really interesting, thought-provoking conversation. Please check out our other podcast, Create Tomorrow, with my amazing colleague, Cassandra Napoli. But for us, that's it for this time. I'll return with a new episode of Lives of Tomorrow in 14 days. I'm Carla Buzasi. I'm the CEO of WGSN, and I'll see you next time.